Hello, everybody. You are listening to What If Nothing's Wrong with You? I am Paula D. Atkinson.
I am Lisa KKs.
And welcome
we
back.
are.
Here we are. We are going to dig into this is a request. We're going to dig into self-diagnosis and when people diagnose themselves with mental health or neurodivergence, etc. So we're going to talk about that because some clinicians, some mental health providers are really into it and some aren't. And we're going to talk about what our theories on why people are doing it and if it's good for you or if it's not good for you.
If you want to do my job for me, great. Why would I be opposed?
I know. It's like that tweet that was like, they're coming to America, they're bringing drugs and they're stealing our jobs. And it's like, oh, great. I love drugs and I hate working.
Great. Win-win. Win-win.
Fantastic. But first, let's get into some chit-chat. You got a new therapist. Look at you going to therapy.
I am going back to therapy. It took years.
Yeah.
To be a therapist, trying to find a therapist in a town in which you know all the therapists.
It's not easy.
And it was an informative process in terms of this podcast, in terms of it. I did some very bad intakes. Like I had intakes where I was like, what is happening? Why are you like it was rough out there.
You had intakes with therapists where you were like
with therapists. Oh, no. I had a lot of the like, this is what's wrong with you. Like I've, got your number. And it was just kind of like, this isn't really what I had a lot of like, oh, you're going to need to be with somebody a long time. And I mean like a lot of like that. And it was just like, I was like, I actually feel like I'm fine. I have some like things I want to talk about in an objective space, some things I ruminate on, but like I'm actually in a pretty good, and it was so interesting to see with new eyes.
Yeah.
This kind of like, I'm very invested in how you are not okay. And the first time that happened to me, I was not okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I was, 22 and a mess. Now I am okay. And it was like, oh, we're still okay.
Gross.
It was a slog. But I mean, it's only been one session. I am into this. She is a decolonized therapist. It's very hard to find that.
Yes.
Everything she says is super. I was like, how do you make people meet one show? She's like, I don't know, how often do you need to meet? Yeah. I was like, yes, that is that is my whole first interview with her was like, do you require this? And she's like, I don't know what you need. I was like, okay, yes, you are. That is exactly
amazing.
Right. Yeah, it was, I may say more about but it's good. I think to be back, I have some things to just unpack, get some objective feedback on, but it's just a reminder. It's hard. You should interview multiple people. If the vibes are off, keep looking. We have another therapist friend who just did this for like years.
Wow. So, right. Yeah. And if somebody, I know we said this on the first couple of episodes, but we will continue to say it. If you go to a therapist and they make you feel as if something is really wrong with you and you need to be in therapy for 1,000 years and that does not resonate, if that does resonate with you, great. If that does not resonate with you, run. It's like I just made a little meme that said, do not take nutritional advice from anyone who makes you feel shame about food. Do not take mental health advice from anybody who makes you feel shame about your mental health. Absolutely not. Run.
I love it. Well, it's like when you take your car in and the car is fine and it's just getting its tune up. Yes. But then it's like, oh, there's 5,000 million things wrong with this car and it's all going to cost
a new catalytic
$3,000. And you're like, but it worked fine. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
Like, let's not pretend there's not some of that going on.
That's why when I was 16, my dad made me take my entire Volvo apart and put it back together over 2 weekends because he would never have a daughter who would get taken advantage of by a mechanic. So I know what a catalytic converter is.
Shut up.
I know. I hated it at the time, but now it's kind of cool, actually.
Do you use this knowledge?
I do. And if I go to a mechanic and he's like, you need this and this and this, I'm like, actually, that was just replaced like a year ago. And I actually know that it's okay. I know.
Like, show me, take it out and show me.
Yeah, show me where it's broken or show. Yeah, totally. I know. Boomer Dad win, which is there's so few and far between.
Oh my God.
right?
I was called Mrs. No Oil, because I thought I'd broken my car because I drove the first car I drove with the engine light on, thinking it was a suggestion, and I didn't know you had to
Burnt the
change your
engine up.
oil. No one told me. I just thought gas was all you had to do, and so our family friends. She's deceased now, but she used to call me Ms. No Oil.
You burnt the car up. The car just the engine just burns up.
Burnt up that little Ford Escort.
Oh my
Wow.
god, that's
So
amazing.
opposite experiences. I wish I'd been forced to take the engine apart.
Yeah. So I wanted to report something somebody like people already know that the Great British Bake Off is mental health in a show. It is so soothing. It is so delightful. There is a new cast member, and by the time this comes out, hopefully she will have won the entire thing. Her name is Nelly. She is Slovakian. She is not a real person. She is a cartoon angel goddess queen. She is so cute. She lives in a large body. She is so earnest and delightful. She's also obsessed with Noel Fielding in a way that is that's the like goth British guy who wears very skinny jeans in 2024, which stick with it. Stick with it. I love her so much. If you just watch the show just for her, or if you can find clips of her, you can also follow her on Instagram. She is so precious. So I just want to give a shout out to Nelly for in these dark times, such a shining light. And she has this thick Slovakian accent, but then I think she's lived in the UK for a long time. So it's like Slovakian and then British on top of it. I can only hear, I don't know, 20% of everything that she says. It doesn't matter. I love her. It's perfect. She's perfect.
Love it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get David into this. He likes the reality show baking things. We're gonna check this out.
This season is really good. There's like a lot of very cute. I think there was only one straight guy and he left immediately. He didn't even compete. He was like, I'm out. And then all the rest of the people are gay. Thank God.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. You have something about color and you are wearing, what is this called?
Nemeko, what am I wearing?
A traditional African.
Lisa's wearing
I'm not
African
sure.
attire.
It's
I don't know which one.
It's Ghanaian. It's a
Oh,
Ghanaian
Ghanaian,
like
okay.
boo-boo. It has pockets, by the way, which they didn't used to put in the clothes in Benin. I mean, I'm into the pockets of this.
Really?
Yeah.
Because the Nigerian ones that have pockets usually.
Really?
Is it called a boo-boo?
Yeah, they do.
It's called.
Oh,
I mean,
not in like.
I don't think we called it. I don't know if that's what the white people called it, but I feel like in Benin it was called a boo-boo. B-O-U-B-O-U.
Okay.
think.
It could. I'm
What
not
was
sure.
it in Nigeria?
I can't even think of the word. I have to ask my mom.
It's gorgeous. It's comfortable.
It is.
The reason I'm wearing it
Yes.
is well, first of all, since we're on self-diagnosis, do you guys feel like you want to self-diagnose yourselves because you're looking at me? And this thing is very colorful. This is like,
Yes.
people in Washington, D.C. are so confused when I went to lunch. Everybody's just like, what is this girl? What is happening?
Love
Do
it.
you feel like you have a touch of chromophobia?
Oh,
Chromophobia?
I don't know.
It's a fear of color.
Oh, I do not
That's-
have.
You do not have chromophobia. So the reason we were going to talk about this is I have always been obsessed and felt like there is something emotional about color because I lived in West Africa where everyone is wearing, the men especially, there's something about men wearing like bright pink and yellow swirl with like great presence, and I don't know, it is like magical. But I went to my Ghanaian nanny's daughter's wedding, and they made us all outfits. It was a whole thing. I cannot wear that outfit because I can't zip it myself, so I didn't wear that today. But it's been like 20 years since I've been immersed in just the color, and I sat there and I was like, this is better for our
Yes.
mental health.
Oh my God.
Why don't we all do this and then I thought, this is just me. I have some weird reaction to color. It's because I, it brings up my nostalgia about Benin, whatever. But I've always missed wearing like my West African fabric. It just is happier. Anyway, there was an article called Why the West is Afraid of Color. And it turns out
Yes.
they have instilled in us something called chromophobia, telling us, wait for it, you're not going to be surprised. They trained, and by they, I mean, you'd have to read the article. It's a bunch of, white dudes, whatever. Color is something for children, savages, minorities, and women.
Oh my God, of course.
Are you surprised, not surprised, Paula?
So whatever the German word for is shocked, not shocked at the same time, I am that. Yes.
That is why black became the color of sophistication. Black became the color of seriousness. And I think one of the articles was paywalled. I found a second article, whose name, I should say the name of the guy. I'll get to it in a minute. I have a feeling it has to do with how they took all of our nationalities away. And
Yes.
They just made us white. It's like stripping color, right? You're stripping everybody's flags. You're stripping everybody's.
Right.
We're all just white and boring, and now black and white is the color of sophistication. But this, I have to tell you, if you can ever go to an Indian or a West African, somewhere where everyone is wearing, it does something to your brain.
Yes.
It's just better. I don't
Gorgeous.
know why we're not all doing this.
Oh my God, I
That is
have so many thoughts. I love this. First of all, I've been to a Pakistani wedding. Gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. Even when I told Carlo we were going to talk about this, Carlo talked about Nameka when he went to your dad's, his retirement party?
Retirement party, yes.
Even Carlo was like, those people know how to dress. First of all, they know how to eat. And second of all, they know how to dress. Like he was like,
I think they go together. The eating and the
Yes.
dressing. I feel like they are connected emotionally. You can explain to us how, probably.
Oh, I totally can. We are not just food anorexic, money anorexic, joy anorexic, rest anorexic. We are color anorexic in the West.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My mom
Were they
said-
wearing? Was
ahead.
this Nigerian traditional garb at the retirement
Yeah.
party? Oh my God!
Yeah.
It's the cloth draped over with the men. I
Mm-hmm.
can't. It will never not be. And the men. This is the other thing. I don't know if this is the case in Nigeria and Jamaica. The men hold hands, like just socially.
Yes. Yes.
Everyone and the
So
women
I can
hold hands.
talk about this a little bit.
Please.
Like in the last time I was there, which was like I think 2006, we went to my parents' hometown and we met, my parents' family friends and my cousins and stuff like that. And just when it was time for us to to meet the other kids who were around the compound and stuff, all the kids were like holding hands. Like guys were holding hands. No issue. It's just what you do with friends,
Oh.
And it was so, comforting. It felt like you belonged, for me. After not, being there, it was the last time I forget what age I was, 2006. And the last time I was there was 1987.
Holy shit.
Before then, yeah. So
20 years.
yeah, it was 20 years. So
20 years.
it was,
Wow.
yeah.
And there is something, I almost
Wow.
get emotional about it with the holding hands because women do it too.
Yeah.
Like, and I would be just like at the market and, if my sister would come up and she'd need to tell me like, oh, they just hold your hand. It's like a reflexive. And there's something very, I think, healing if coming from a culture where we don't do that.
Yeah.
Especially seeing grown men holding each other's hands, teenage boys who have not been stripped by homophobia.
Yes.
Because I just would always watch it and be like, oh, now, and we could talk about the fact that there is homophobia in West Africa. I mean, and because it's sort of assumed that doesn't exist, there's like this where there is
Right.
no fear of you're going to be labeled as this, and it lets people just like do this lovely connected thing, and it always just
human thing.
mesmerized me.
Yeah.
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 Oh my God, I love all of this. My mom came to visit me when I lived in New York City. My mom came to visit me, and she was like, I could never live on the East Coast because I look terrible in black. Because that's all anybody wears. And I have to tell you, moving here has been so helpful because people wear color. And also,
Color.
everyone here is over 70 and gay. So people wear a lot of color. And it's so nice. No one wears black here. It's too fucking hot to wear black here, but it's so nice. Also, all of the now that Carlo is in real estate, it's so fascinating to see like when obviously people not from Palm Springs buy a house and redo the house, they make everything fucking gray. I hate the gray floors, the gray countertops, the gray. I mark my words. In 10 years, we're going to look at all this gray shit and it's going to be the same way we looked at all the brown shit of the 70s. And we're going to be like, what were we thinking? Why was
Also,
everything-
why is everyone so depressed? How
Exactly.
weird.
Right?
Let's ponder.
Right?
My whole house is, I mean, it was one of the, now they build houses to be neutral, right? So
Ugh.
my whole house is gray and I've lived there long enough now that I'm starting to be like, we gotta paint some of these walls. This is,
Yes.
but I think, Paula, I just thought of this. I can't believe it didn't, black is slimming.
Oh, totally.
I feel like that is because I decided after that wedding, I was like, I haven't bought clothes in a while, but I'm like, I'm not buying black. I'm buying color. This is,
Yes.
I don't like this. I'm going to be the weird therapist that's like in the whatever.
Great.
But I do think it comes from that, like, black is slimming. It makes you look better.
Totally.
It all flows.
Classy,
from
rich
that.
people wear black. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's terrible for your brain. It's not good for you. No, you should wear color. I mean, one of the things in Palm Springs is the colored doors. Like there's pink doors and yellow doors. You want to paint your house white because it's so fucking hot and you don't want a dark color. But then all of the doors are like we have a bright orange wall. It's so nice. It's just like, what did we talk about last time? Simple things that you can do to make your brain happier. Color, put color in your life. Also, Lisa and I were talking last night about those therapist offices that are so like curated and like stuffy. And then as opposed to like, look at my office, it's like such cultivated chaos is what Carla would call it. But everything is pink or rainbow, which I appreciate. I don't want anybody trying to help me with my mental health who's in a black office.
And some people, I mean, it is fancy and it's, very, and I can see there is a sort, when I go into those it's like there is a grounded, I can see where some people, and I always get a little bit of an inferiority, like, my office should be, this fancy, serious, like what we see on TV for therapists' office. And mine is like yours. It has these wild blue chairs. There's plants appearing everywhere. I've hung my stuff to paint. I'm like, I don't care anymore. I'm over it. I can't be serious about this. But it's like, it's a very different, I think, approach. And I don't know, my office might be chaotic and make people anxious. That's what my husband, when I set my office up, my husband was like, that's going to make people anxious. That's going to make people anxious.
Oh, really?
And I was like, well, those people may not be a good fit for me because there's just going to be, I can't sustain order for that long. Some people can, and those people probably need to go to the cultivated office therapist.
That's true.
Maybe that's why we have both.
That's why we have both, and that's why you and I have the clients that we have, probably. Yeah. All right, Lisa, you have a story. You've referred to it as we've been talking last week, or as the do it again story. What is this?
So, because we're going to talk a little bit today about neurodivergence with because that is the most common area of self-diagnosis.
Yeah.
I had this experience, and I recently went to a training on autism, so it's like on my brain. I live in a neurospicy household. I kind of see it a lot. And there was this parent disciplining a kid. We were at this fall farm, and she was doing the do it again kind of. Anyway, I saw much questionable parenting. I also saw a child get hit. Anyway, I was like, oh God, I was having some moments. But when that happened, I thought, oh my God, there are probably thousands of autistic children whose parents did do it again or something like it.
Yeah.
And they did it again.
Yeah.
Because they're literal. And then they got diagnosed with ODD.
Yes.
And they're so confused. They're like, literally.
Say what ODD is for our listeners? Oppositional defiance disorder, which is just a kid being a kid, by the way.
Yeah, I don't really believe in it. I'm highly, highly, highly skeptical of it because I think a lot of it is is self-regulation, trauma, or autism or ADHD.
Yep.
But I really believe I saw that scenario and I was like, oh my God, I bet that's happened hundreds and thousands of times. And the child is so confused.
My brother, so this will be, I'm going to talk more about this when we have we're going to do an episode specifically about autism and narcissism and where they intersect and how they can look similar, but how they're different. And my brother is autistic and he got diagnosed with that, or whatever it was called in the 80s. It wasn't called ODD. It was called something else. I forget.
Oh, was that the explosive? There was an explosive
social
one.
disorder or something. But anyway, my brother's almost 60 now. He is so autistic. Right. Like my brother knows, if you want to know about any kind of bird that is native to California, I can call my brother and he will know. Like my brother is very autistic. And I think about him growing up, and thank God he had my mother, who was always like, well, his brain is just different, and wouldn't let him get all of the shit. I know.
With no knowledge. Parents like that, because to do that in a context with no information around you and no one validating it, your mother is like,
she knew things.
Otherworldly.
She knew things.
Worldly.
Yeah, she knew things. It's true. Yeah, no, she wouldn't let them. She wouldn't let them medicate him. She wouldn't let them. She was like, he'll find his place, and he did, with all the other farmers who wanted to know everything about birds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are his people, and where his brain is comfortable.
Exactly, and it served him well.
Yeah. Should we get into it? Do we have any more chit chat?
No, I think that's it. I think that's it of the chit chat. So we're going to talk about self-diagnosis. I wanted to say that this is a thing. That's why we're talking about it. But we're also talking about it because I have a friend who asked us to talk about it. And the way she brought it up was talking about how there are lots of the children who I define anyone under 25 as the children who are self-diagnosing themselves from TikTok, basically. And so I did a little research, and there's a study that came out that said much of TikTok's rapid rise in social media stardom occurred obviously during the pandemic. There was a surge in growth of 180% among specifically 15 to 25-year-olds. So also during the pandemic, they were isolated, they were anxious, they didn't know what the heck was going on, just like all of us, but the general unwellness that came with the lockdowns, obviously. So then it's not a surprise that in the last several years, there's a sharp increase in the number of teens and young adults using the app to learn about mental health diagnosis, learn about mental health disorders, self-diagnose themselves with a variety of conditions. So most often, and Lisa and I are going to talk about this, they are diagnosing themselves with autism, ADD, ADHD, borderline personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So the first thing Lisa and I want to say is great. I mean, that's how I feel about it. I guess we were talking about before this, like, I think it's great. I mean, I can understand how some clinicians may find it annoying when a young person comes in and they're like listing off their self-diagnoses. I would question any clinician that is so self-righteous that they won't allow somebody just some curiosity around these diagnoses.
But do you really get it? Like, if we were to unpack for a moment.
Yeah.
Genuine annoyance.
Yeah.
I can't locate it.
Oh, no, I don't.
Like, I can't figure out. That's one thing I have many cringe moments I look back on and think, oh God, I did that in my early.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever experienced feeling annoyed at a client saying to me, I'm wondering if this is what's going on. What do you think? I wish they would do it more.
Yeah.
I have people that I finally bring up a diagnosis and they're like, I've always wondered that. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I could have like sped this up. I wasn't looking for it because I was, I wish I can't locate that.
No, the only cringe I have is, Oh shit, I wish I'd thought of that. I'm so sorry. Like a general, especially if I've had a client for like 10 years and then they're like, might I be autistic? And I'm like, oh, fuck, totally. That's my cringe, but not in their own drawing it in. I need us to remember, like I do over and over and over on this podcast, I need us to remember that the function of the self-diagnosis is because of capitalism and racism and classism, because mental health is fucking expensive and not everybody can go to a therapist. And thank God for TikTok that people are learning about these things. Think of all the people in my brother's generation that didn't have a mother like mine that got told that they're dumb or just got told that they're idiots.
The suicide rates of people thinking there is something wrong with me, and think about us in the 80s.
Totally.
I mean, I think about me with a decade of ruminative OCD.
Totally.
Figuring it out on the internet, going to the Ross Anxiety Center and being like, I have this thing. And they were like, oh, okay, you want some Zoloft? Like, no one else. I had been to multiple therapists. Nobody even screened me. They did all this psychodynamic bullshit about, oh, this is about your father. I was probably the most anxious child on the planet. I had to be. I don't think anyone even considered that.
Right.
And we grew up in the 80s with no internet, no ability. We had no language for depression. I didn't know the word depression. I didn't know the word anxiety. I didn't know OCD. I mean, it's like, it's completely empowering and changes everything, even though labels can be painful and not good and not helpful, fine. And
like we talked about,
having language.
Yes.
And some form of like organization and some sense of, oh, this has happened to other people. It's not is super helpful.
Absolutely. Oh my God. At one time I was talking to a family member of my partner's once at this big Italian Christmas. There were a million people. It was very overwhelming for my little white lady heart. But there was one guy who was in his 70s and he was asking me about my job, blah, blah, blah. He started crying when I kept like drilling home for him that he's probably not stupid. He probably just had, maybe he's always had, I've always just struggled with paying attention and I didn't do well in school and I'm probably just dumb. And I was like, or you have ADD and that's a thing. And some brains just work like that. And the idea that all the brains can learn in the same way is super fucked up and white supremacist and dumb and makes
or
people
need to be book learners. Like we all need to be book learners. Like, Jesus, it's so...
This 75-year-old man started crying. He was like, I've never heard anyone say that before. And I was like, So like, good job.
It's heartbreaking.
Kid. It is heartbreaking.
I think they're saving lives. Honestly, I genuinely believe, and I have had neuropsychs done for both of my boys, and one of them was great. One of them was done by this woman that, if you're about to get a neuropsych by an individual in the DMV, please email me and I will tell you if this is that person and you should not go. Because she was so bad at it, she essentially invalidated it, which can happen. But she said contempt. She was like, telling me the diagnosis. And she's like, it's fine. But I mean, all these like TikTok kids that make this like their whole identity. That's a whole other thing you're going to have to deal with. This is when they decide this is their whole identity. And I remember the amount of contempt and just being so confused. And like, that's part of accepting a diagnosis.
Yes.
That is a developmental stage. And I'm sure teenagers take it a bit far due to that is their job. That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Take everything a bit far.
Sure.
It's like that is a developmental stage of accepting and I mean, the thing that I learned at this training that is hilarious is that a very common special interest of autistic people is autism.
Yes, I was about to say that. Of course it is.
Of course they're on the TikTok. And of course the little ADHDers are hyper-focusing on their ADHD. I don't have a patient in the world that I've diagnosed with something who hasn't gone off, read about it, and wanted to talk about it a lot as a stage. And I genuinely think this is like saving people's lives and saving people from depression and saving people from stigma and helping them find community. Why would we be mad about that?
It's so weird.
I don't understand.
I mean, I can speak for myself when I finally got to rehab being an anorexic in recovery was a huge part of my identity for years. It had to be, because I had to focus on it so that I could not die, so that I could on a daily basis not die. So if somebody is like, oh, I am not neurotypical, that is such a relief. And then they think about it all the time. Of course, they're probably not going to do that. They're probably not going to over identify, whatever that even means. They're probably not going to do that forever, but of course they're going to do it. Also, teenagers, the whole developmental stage of teenness is tribal. They are it's when their little tribal brain flicks on. So they're trying to find their tribe. So if they find the other non-binary, autistic, ADHD weirdos, great. What's the difference between that and me hanging out with all the theater dorks? It was like, it's the same thing. It's just that there was no mental health diagnosis for theater dorks.
Probably now there is. We could probably find a TikTok for that. Theater dork, autism, theater dork, ADHD. There probably is. And God bless. But I view it like when I moved to Benin, I spent, when you move to a new country, you're basically telling someone like, you're kind of in a new culture now, whether it's an eating disorder or it's autism or it's ADHD. You're kind of saying like, there's this new frame. It's like when I moved to Benin for the first 6 months, all I was figuring out was how do I eat? How do I talk? Where is the, where's the market? How do I use it? How do I, you're just upset. And then after 6 months, it's, your lens kind of broadens.
Totally.
But that's what we do when we're kind of adjusting and we're thinking like, oh, how does this affect me? Oh, could it be this? Could it be that?
Yeah.
I do not get anger. And we know that medical doctors have this too, the eye rolling when you go on WebMD. And it's like, yeah, why might that be?
Probably because the medical industrial complex is pure evil and is a death cult and we're all going to die. But yeah, be mad at me because I went to Dr. Google about my shoulder pain.
Right.
Sure. Right. But of course we are. And also just like we've said on this podcast before, the way medical doctors used to work was that they know more about your body than you do. They might know the name of all the bones, but they don't know the actual lived internal experience of living in your body. And the same is with your brain. So if you're like, I think I might have ADHD, to a clinician, to a therapist, and they're like, well, you don't really know what you're talking about, run, because they don't know more about your brain than you do. And if that's their reaction to it, that there's some sort of ego thing that you know more about your brain than they do, that's not a good therapist.
No, or a good. And I think when you have kids, I have seen this. I haven't had a ton of health problems myself. It's certainly changed as I've aged and I've experienced more of the dismissiveness. But when you have kids that have tricky stuff, you experience that. And then I believe I have diagnosed all of my children's. I literally had to take a diagnosis.
Oh my God.
Figure out who would listen to me about it. And these were people they'd seen before that were just like, oh, you want me to look at the adenoid? Oh yeah, I could look at that. I'm like, why? I've never been wrong. I have yet to be I think there's something going on here and there's not something going on. It's not
right.
And it's when you have to do that repeatedly, it's people are going to Google. And what happens with mental health, like you were saying, therapy is expensive. Some people may not even be able to get into a therapist's office to get a diagnosis of depression or anxiety. That is a privilege. When you're talking about a diagnosis of ADHD or autism, people believe, as for children, those cost, if you can't go to Children's or somewhere in network, which can have a 9-month wait.
Oh my God.
9 months is a school year. You're losing an entire year of education on a waiting list. And that
kid's a completely different person in 9 months.
And they've been completely demoralized because nothing that they need to, they've had a year of total demoralization.
Right.
Or you can, if you are privileged, you can go pay $3,000 to $5,000 out of pocket. That's often what it costs to get a neuropsych privately and quickly. But that's the price barrier of the
wow.
So of course people are self-diagnosing. And then you take adults So adults, I just learned this in a training. I didn't think I could diagnose autism. I knew I could diagnose ADHD. I still felt like, can I really? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because they kind of drill that into us. You got to go get the special assessment, whatever.
Whatever.
But for adults, they don't need an IEP. They don't need,
No.
and we can diagnose it. Social workers, anyone. And we should. Because
Yeah.
I'm always saying to people like, well, I don't know, but do you want to spend $3,000 at Styx Road? Like, adults don't need that.
No.
They know. When you say to an adult, here's the criteria, let's talk it through. Does this feel right to you? They generally know. And usually what I'm finding is they go, I think my mom, or I think my
Totally.
dad, or I think grandpa. Like, there's usually a little click.
Someone.
And then they go, this would explain this and this and this. And if
Yeah.
that doesn't happen, you go, okay, maybe we're going to poke around at something else. But this idea that like, oh, people are self-diagnosing out of rebellion or they're
Right.
or out of like, I don't know, arrogance. I don't know what it is. They're doing it because who can go? These assessments require family history, surveys. They take time.
Oh my God.
It's
Yeah.
intense. Nobody has
Well-
$3,000 to do this. This is
And
nonsense.
And especially with ADHD, I don't know if this is two things with the ADHD thing. Like after COVID, so many people experiencing ADHD symptoms. It was a chicken or the egg. I don't know. It doesn't matter. What matters right now is that you're suffering. I don't care if you always had it or now if you have it. Or so many women, like we know, we've talked about, so many women have menopausal ADHD symptoms, right? Like their brain worked fine and all of a sudden their brain no worky, which is part of menopause, by the way. And a lot of times, so two things. One, I tend to diagnose ADHD by the amount of shame they carry in their body. Because if you have felt ashamed of your inability to concentrate and do school like the other kids are doing school since birth, then I know that you have always had ADHD. That is how, if there's people who are like, I don't know, I just can't think straight. Okay, well, great. Not that you don't have ADHD, but that's, if I have a client who's like, I'm always so ashamed of the fact that my brain doesn't seem to do what other kids' brains do. Big red flag for me. The other part that's so interesting, and I don't know if you have this, but so many specifically non-men who start taking ADHD meds later, like in their 40s, late 30s and 40s, they're like, oh, I get it. I get what the ADHD meds do. I don't like the way it feels. And then they just keep, and the way I tell myself, the way I talk about it to them and to me is like, oh, you have come up with so many ways to get around this, so many tricks for yourself to participate in capitalism and white supremacist school that it's exhausting for you, but it's actually, you're so used to it that to be hyped up on the meds doesn't even feel that good. I had one woman who was like, even if I wake up at 4:30 and take the Vyvanse, I won't be able to sleep that night. And I was like, okay, great. And she's like, it's just not worth it. I was like, okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think the trick with all of this, whether it's the ADHD or the autism, especially with women,
yeah,
the extent to which we are trained to mask it. I mean, I literally sit with people and it's not like, and what they taught us in this training that I think is so valuable is not just, is somebody making eye contact with you? You have to ask, what is it like for you to do that? What is your, and they will say, oh, it's really distracting. It's really hard. I hate it. It's tired.
Yeah.
That is because it's a survival skill. And the compensations sometimes I think are so embedded.
Yes.
You almost can't, even they can't like parse it. And I'm starting to learn with asking the questions, you have to do it in such a like kind of detailed way. I mean, because we are so high masking as a culture, we are people are forced to survive.
Right.
It's with the autism too, you get the shame.
Yeah.
And you get the like, I just can't do it. You get very much there's something wrong with me because I didn't like these things everyone else liked.
Yeah.
I was the like difficult kid. I was the kid always having tantrums. And it's always this like, I was this pain in the butt. And it's, but when you break it down, they're like, I just couldn't do it. I don't see it. I don't get it. It didn't make sense to me. So And it can be so subtle. And I do want to say the number. So in this training,
please.
this is the last thing. So they did a study. If you're kind of thinking, oh, is self-diagnosis BS? I shouldn't trust the self-diagnosis. Everyone now thinks they're autistic. I mean, that's the whole, like, everyone now is autistic. So they can't all be autistic. Well, no one has been diagnosed with it in our generation. The older you are, the less likely you are to have the diagnosis. They did a study of Kaiser files. And in the Kaiser health system, based on what we know about the prevalence of autism in the population, there should have been 44,000 autistic people in the Kaiser medical records. There were 1,500.
Whoa. Wow.
That is the diagnostic gap. So, of course, right now, all of these adults
are
like
walking
your
around.
brother, are walking around like so confused. And there's a chronic nature to it. The stress tolerance builds. So I'm noticing a lot of people falling apart in their 40s and 50s. And they're like, I used to be able to do that. And I think the chronic stress builds and they just cave. And I think when that's happening, you have to at least look at, could this be neurodivergence? And it's not going to look obvious. These are going to be people that you're like, no, there's no way. Like, there's no way. But it's, if they're telling you like, I'm different, something feels different, I don't get social things, they're having trouble, I don't know, it's screen it. Or if it's you,
screen it,
ask or think about it. It's quite possibly happening. People don't wonder if they're autistic. Usually it's not something people walk around wondering. If there's not something going on, I mean, it might be that you have ADHD and you're off a scooch, I don't know, but it's not something people typically wonder.
Unless they are. Yeah, it's like being queer. Like, straight people don't want to be queer. If you think you might be queer, you probably are. Because, like, straight people don't think about it. Turns out.
It's like, it's not on their mind.
Exactly. Yeah. So I have two things I want to say. Number one, I think there's two, like, kind of spiritual ways that I think about, or two things that I want to say from one of the things I think about all the time is, like, specifically the question that this listener posed to us, which is like, why do all the children have so many diagnoses? So I think about this in terms of, if we 100 years ago, quite literally, right, was like this, America is amazing and the Industrial Revolution and we are incredible and we are working and we work hard and we work so hard and that's why we have the most amazing country in the world, blah, 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 blah. And then, like, the pendulum swings all the way to now, which is that everybody's tired and everybody doesn't want to do this. And if we have been promoting for 100 years that a sane brain is a brain that is pillowed in privilege, is a white, cis, straight male brain, that's what we've said is a sane brain. I just feel like the children are like, I don't want to work. I don't want to do this whole get a job, do the thing, then die. I don't want a 401k. Like, the future that I know the boomers gave us is not appealing. And I think the children are saying through a lot of diagnosis, I'm sick. I can't do it. I don't want to do this, which I think we should listen to, because they're not wrong, because it is a scam and it's terrible.
Well, and I think also, I totally agree. And if you think about so we make this industrialized society. And then we're like, okay, to get all the people to do this, we got to put them in these schools. And we're going to do the schools in these certain ways. And all the kids are going to sit. And really, they're sitting for 8 hours a day. That's not based on child development. And it's not based on what children need. That's based on babysitting hours, because we got to put the parents in this industrialized world. And then what happens is, I think because the children have language now. They're like, oh, I know why I don't want to sit in this box. I'm no longer internalizing it as there's something wrong with me. And then you have the parents realizing it and going and saying, this kid needs an IEP. He needs a smaller classroom. He needs individualized attention.
He needs to go outside.
Every child needs 15 recess. Don't even get me started on the recesses. And we're going to use recess as a punishment, by the way, which is really going to help everything. If we take a kid who needs to wiggle and we take away recess, that's really going to be super helpful. If you do that,
Yeah.
And then, like, if my kids, I believe, I mean, I don't think I'm exaggerating. I could be. I think half of my child's class is on an IEP.
Oh,
If half or
everyone.
more of the students are on an IEP, maybe the issue is not that we have all these sensitive baby students who are making excuses. Maybe this is not a great container for children.
Maybe
and
the
how they
system
develop.
is not working. So
And
in
the parents know it and the children know it.
Right.
And now we have language for it and people are advocating. And
Yes.
before, these were all just bad kids.
right.
And it's like, that is why everybody wants to quash this,
yes.
I think. But it's just, what we're learning is that this work container we're all in, this 5-day work
Nothing-
week,
it doesn't
this
work.
working 70 hours a week, it's not good for human beings. And there's language about it now. And that's
Makes us
the
sick.
issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember in biology class, if you did the little experiment and your amoebas didn't do what they were supposed to do, it's not that there was something wrong with your amoebas, it's that the culture of your petri dish was fucked. That's what all of the children are saying. The culture of the petri dish is fucked. It's not, it's making us all sick. They're the canaries in
making-
the coal mine. Yes.
And there's 10%. It almost feels to me like what we do with like token minorities. There's
Yeah.
10% of these kids that like excel, right? And they're these like wonder kids, whatever, they're the like, probably the kids like me that were like made for school and all the
I
rules
did
and
that
whatever.
too.
And like,
My brain
we're the
did that.
wonder kids and everybody's going, well, look at, it's working for her. What's wrong with all the rest of you? And by the way, all you parents, what's wrong with all the rest of you? And it's
And the
like,
mother,
none
it's always
of
the mother's
this,
fault.
none of it is based on looking at child development, what children need.
Totally.
And that it's just coming apart at the wheels. And the kids and
Great.
everybody is just like, I'm not doing it anymore. And
Great.
we can keep trying to force them all to do it. But I don't know. To me, it's like you create a world where you're like, oh, you seem to be a bit of a tinkerer. We're going to put you in car school. You seem to
Yes.
be a bit of, I mean, it's like this idea that all children fit in this box is madness.
It's
I
the
could
same with
go on.
bodies.
I
All the
won't.
bodies should be small and thin and muscular. That's not how bodies work. That the idea that all the bodies should be the same shape is ridiculous. The idea that all the children's brains should work the same and learn the same is so weird. And the children
And-
are telling us.
And if we diagnose them, if they self-diagnose or if someone else diagnoses them, we then have to accommodate them. We then have to change the system and the structure. And
Yes.
nobody wants to do that. That is the primary piece that I think maybe now that we're back full circle, maybe that's deep down what underlies the resentment about
yeah.
the self-diagnosis.
Right.
It's like, well, if you have that, then I'm going to have to like treat you differently. I'm going to have to like accommodate it. I'm going to have to change how I view the world. I don't want to do that. So I just need you to let this go. And really, you're just lazy. I need you to just understand you're lazy and you're making excuses because then I can be comfortable in this system that isn't working for anybody. It's nonsense.
It is
Clearly,
nonsense.
I have feelings about this. I have some
So
anger
do
about
I.
this.
I'm 1000% on all the autistic kids. I am on their side. I am completely on their side. So the last thing we want to make sure we say, because Lisa and I have both had experiences with therapy where therapists, mental health professionals are trying to treat neurodivergent people like and remember that every single therapeutic intervention that therapists are taught in school is for a neurotypical person. They might have anxiety, they might have depression, they might even have schizophrenia, but they are catered towards neurotypical people, and to not cater them to brains that work very differently and take in information differently and express emotions. Sometimes they can't even express emotions.
No,
So
it's called alexithymia. That's a thing.
Right.
And then we should probably do an episode on the whole way that behaviorism fits into all of this and becomes problematic. But yeah, and I mean, I've been doing it too. I just diagnosed somebody and she was like, why have we been at this for 10 years? Like, what? And I said, I need to be clear with you. I got my first training on autism Friday. I've been working in this field for a decade. We do not learn about it. We are just now piercing to where clinicians are starting to learn, oh, this is a thing. It doesn't look like Rain Man all the time. It's subtle. It's not what you think. Like literally my first training on that was a week ago. I mean, it's like, and my
That's
training
wild.
in grad school was, a kid throwing tantrums on a video. I'm like,
Right.
that's a problem. As a field, we are not there. This is like knowledge that has to catch up. And the reason
Yeah.
it's so important is that we are harming people. If you are treating a neurodivergent person, especially an autistic person, but even an ADHDer, like a neurotypical, you are doing harm. It's harmful. You're
Well,
asking their brain to do something it cannot and will not ever do. My therapy sessions with people that I know are autistic, they're like a different planet
yeah.
from my neurotypical ones. A
Of course.
different planet. It's like bananas.
I mean, when you said Rain Man, great callback, by the way. And then I thought about like, what are the? Oh, we have Temple Grand and we have Rain Man. Those are like the
And
only.
Hannah Gadsby.
And
And by the way, guess who else? Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd is autistic. He's
Oh, that
out
makes-
as autistic.
that
There's
makes
going to
sense.
be ones that now we're going to get a little surprised by, and that's going to be helpful in the culture as people come out. But like, it's just not. But right, we have these like ideas about that it's only this, and and it's all based on a white 8-year-old boy is what it's all
Right.
based on. It's like
Wild.
it's maddening.
So, in conclusion, thank you, TikTok self-diagnosed children. We are
Keep at it.
We're grateful to you. We are grateful for your service. Thank you. You are helping the old Gen Xers, and I don't know if the boomers are listening, probably not. But it is very helpful. So keep doing it. And if somebody gets annoyed, that's their own self-loathing. It's not yours.
Yeah. Ask them about their colonialist cultural buy-in.
Ask them how their white supremacy is doing. Yeah. So as always, if you have a request, if you have something that you want us to explore, please tell us. You can reach out. I'm Paula D. Atkinson on all the things. Lisa is the Lisa K's on all the things, right?
I'm on the TikTok now.
Oh, and
I'm a
Lisa's on the
TikToker.
TikTok now. You're good at it. I'm not good
learning
at it.
about the TikTok. You're on the TikTok too. We're
I am on the
TikToking.
TikTok. I am on the TikTok, but I just basically repost the memes that I make for Instagram. I don't do a whole lot.
We are a little scared of the TikTok.
It's a
we're
little
learning. It's a new culture. We're learning about it.
It's terrifying. But yeah, reach out to us. Watch us on YouTube. Subscribe. Ding the dingy bell thing. So yes, if you have any suggestions, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.
Yes.
Yay! Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast and any written materials related to it represent the opinions of Paula Atkinson and Lisa Kids and our guests to the show and any written materials. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. It is for informational and educational purposes only, and because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship.